Okay. Yeah, it should be up now. Welcome to the stream. Sorry about the delay, guys.
Awesome. Okay. Well, welcome everyone. We will get started in about 2 minutes. So on MIT time, as is customary. So yeah, just feel free in the meantime, while we're waiting, you should put in the chat what you're most excited about for this weekend, because we're definitely really excited to see you guys. So awesome. Well, these all sound really great. Yeah, Blueprint's always going to be very, very fun. But yeah, this is an intro to Git workshop. And so we'll get started from here and then just for some introductions, I'm Janet. I'm from the Blueprint team, and Linda will also be here. She is just virtual right now. She's helping out in the chat as well. So yeah, we'll go through this relatively basic tutorial, and then we can also talk about more things. And obviously, you guys will get time to like get help and whatever support you need during the hackathon itself, during the learnathon and hackathon itself as well. Awesome. So yeah, I guess the way that we're going to structure this is we're going to talk about like setup for why is Git necessary, and then we'll go through some basic toolkit, some like yeah, basic cheat sheet to have about like things that you could do with Git, and then yeah, this is meant to be like a relatively quick workshop, so I think our goal is to just give you a sense of understanding, and then the rest is like, once you have these ideas and this intuition, what else can you do with it? So yeah, basically to start off for the link to slides, you can go to this link. So go.hackmit.org/intro dash git. And then you can basically, yeah, you can basically follow along and then because we'll have some links that you can click on within here. Awesome. Okay. And then Linda, if you want to just send the link to the chat as well, if you haven't already, that would be great. And then cool. So I think the first part we want to talk about for setting up Git is like, why do we want to have this thing? Like, why is this Git thing useful, right? So I think when we're thinking about collaborating, it's like when you're collaborating on building a coding project, what are some things that you want to use? And some of these things are like, you know, maybe you want to use Google Docs, or maybe you want to use like a USB drive, or maybe, worst comes to worst, Microsoft Word. So I think like a fun fact is that I have known people who like will just like some monsters who would just like write code in Microsoft Word and then share it with each other because they were just doing it for fun. But usually, this is not the way that we collaborate in a coding context. So instead, what we use is this thing called Git, which is hosted on github.com. So what this is for is that it's to collaborate and share code. It's to like test and merge your code between different like people's branches and different, which we'll get to later. And then also it helps to like generally streamline the development pipeline and make things easier. So we do this through like this thing called Git along with version control. So basically, what is version control and Git? So version control is this practice of tracking and managing the changes of the code. So if you think about like, sort of if you can like sort of think about the process of like writing code in general as like sort of this continuous timeline of like, oh, like I'm continually adding these things. Like versions are like specific checkpoints where you've maybe like done big things or like implemented certain features, and then you want to like sort of understand the process of development in a more modular way. And so, yeah, like, going from there, the benefits of this is like you allow multiple people to work in the same code base. So, like, who did what, and this is often better for, like, in team situations, like any sort of team situation, whether it's that you're building a hackathon or maybe that you're like building platforms or whatever else, where like you need a lot of people to be working on it at the same time. And you also get to turn back the clock when mistakes are made. So if anyone like does something that like accidentally breaks something, you can like sort of, okay, let's go back to the previous functioning version and work with that. And you can also test different features on different versions of your project. So maybe you're not necessarily confident that like implementing one feature wouldn't break another feature, but you like want to prototype this like maybe this alternate algorithm for like, you know, sorting out these like pairs of I don't know maybe like pairs of like recommendations for of like people and their favorite restaurant that they want to go to in your web app, and you can then test like different algorithms on these different versions and different branches in order to figure out sort of like what is the best approach, and then sort of merge and go from there. So yeah, like Git is a version control system, and GitHub manages these online repositories using Git. And so if you think of a repository, it's basically like, okay, like a place where all of your code for one project is located. So awesome. I think the first thing to start off with is just basically, like you should make a GitHub account to see it for yourself. So what you should do is I think you should visit github.com and then you can create an account. And then if you do use your school email, I think they do have potential student benefits. So I think they give you GitHub Pro, which has like free Copilot, things like that. And Copilot is like the software that basically is like an AI assistant for like, code generation, essentially. Awesome. So at this stage, if there are any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Linda will be answering them. And then also, like we'll just probably like wait for 1 or 2 minutes for you to like set up your GitHub, and then we'll go to the next part. Awesome. Okay. So presuming that everyone's got their GitHub account set up. Also, I will understand that pacing of this is relatively introductory. So if you guys have like sort of other questions, feel free to like send them in the chat and also just reserve them for tomorrow. I think it's like when you situate like questions in the context of maybe a project that you're learning or a project that you're building, I think is generally a more productive process of like sort of understanding what it is exactly that you want to implement. So awesome. Next up, let's talk about, like the CLA, aka the command line interface. So awesome. I guess the first question is just like, how do we, like, when you're thinking about interacting with our computers and sort of like building up a code base, it's like, how do we actually do this? So, like, maybe you have a mouse, or maybe you have a keyboard, and maybe you have a touch screen, or maybe, voice camera controls. And these are like all things that you could possibly do and, use. Or you could also do these things called commands, which are like used to like call specific programs. So basically, the command line interface allows you to tell your computer what to do by like typing in some lines of commands, literally. So it's an interface, right? And then so one example of this is like, you can try this out by having like a Windows, and then like you can also in Windows and Macs Mac and Linux terminals. So you have this thing called like, a PowerShell or Ubuntu on Windows, and you also have like the terminal in general. So in order to access this stuff, you can do like, so I have a MacBook, so I would do like, command space to like Spotlight search on Macs for the terminal. Or, if you're on Windows, I think you should be able to do, like, you should be able to like go like to the Windows main menu and you should be able to find like PowerShell or Ubuntu, or you can at least download it. So, yeah, if you are able to Cool. If you're able to go to there, you can go to, once you have that, you can go to common commands. And then here's some examples of like things you could do in the terminal. So for like starters, you could type these into your command line interface, and then you can run the command by basically typing it and pressing enter. So here's like a quick GitHub cheat sheet for just like the basic common commands that you could do to be able to, run and access the terminal. So I guess the first, exercise that we can do is like, what does this do? So you should like try it out on your own one, and then we can also walk through it very soon. But you should try this. So basically what you do is you like command space, you go to the terminal, and then you should be able to type in, terminal. Okay, actually, can people see my terminal screen? Let's see.
Yes, we can see it.
Oh, perfect. Okay, cool. So yeah, if you like go into your terminal, you can, maybe I'll like CD into the specific folder that I want to go to, and then you want to do make dir Vishal. So, or you could go make dir like specific name that you want to do. So cool. If I just do, I think if you do this, and I can make dir. Okay. So we currently like it seems to just be a space. And then so let's walk through like what this actually then does. But I think firstly we should see, okay, you shouldn't put spaces or special characters in like when you're typing in the terminal, because the terminal is a text interface. So it's a very simple interface that you shouldn't have like that will not accept basically special characters. So yeah, if you go to that specific folder, you'll be able to see that, like, oh, they made this specific folder. So if you go and see in your own, directory, like if you go into your Finder and you navigate to the specific place that you like had set up your terminal, you should be able to find like a specific folder with the name of the directory that you made. Cool. I think we can also do this command. So, you should try like what this does when you like type it in into the same place. And also if you like don't have a specific like if you don't have a specific preprinting, like if you're, like for example, I think when you initialize onto terminal, you'll see that there's no specific prefixes that are like this. That's just because you're in a different location, right? For your terminal. And also Vishy, I think he is on PowerShell, so it will like look different basically if you're on a MacBook versus like Linux or versus a Windows laptop. Cool. So after you try this out, you will be able to see that, oh, there's like, it shows like a folder that you made. So this shows the previous directory that you made in there. And then if you like also look in the other, like if you had other folders in there, it would show basically the names of all the folders and also files that like a terminal generally shows. Cool. And then you should also try this. And what you'll generally know is that you will go into a new folder. So basically, this shows the path of the directory that you're in, and then you'll be able to be in like a specific folder. So this is just to get like an overview, sort of a like visual understanding of like how these commands actually relate to like the general folders. So I think, this establishes like, here are things that you can type into this specific like little box of like this command line interface, and then how it will like change basically this interface then tells your computer to do specific things. So you can make folders, you can change to different folders, you can do other things. Some of the commands are in the GitHub, the Git cheat sheet that we have, but also there are other ones that you can look up. Like for example, you can do like MV folder to like another location, and that would just like move a folder basically. So you can like do a lot of things on your like computer by like changing a bunch of files without necessarily even, like having to do it more visually. Cool. So, yeah, sometimes a computer is also pretty smart in the sense that, like, it will give you some common error messages, and sometimes they will be able to guess sort of like what errors you might be making. So, like, one of them is like, oh, like, if you try and just like change directory into like a folder that doesn't exist, they'll tell you, like, no, there's no such file or directory. Cool. So now you're done with your folder, how do you leave? So maybe currently you're still in your like your names folder. So then you do cd dot dot, and then these dots basically mean like you go a level higher and you go back to the original. Yeah, you go to the directory above the current directory. And then yeah, if you do cd space, I think it does switch to the home directory of your computer. Or you can do on, I think on MacBooks, for example, you can do like let me just change to uh cool. And then you can like if you do cd tilde, that will direct you also to the home directory. I think so this is on MacBooks. I think this might also apply to Windows, but I'm not 100% sure. So if you have questions, you should drop questions into the chat and Linda can also help answer. Awesome. Okay, so here's a fun task, or hopefully it's fun, for you guys to potentially do, which is basically you want to make some folders for your classes. So what you should do is make a folder anywhere in your computer, maybe name it after your high school, and remember no special characters. It can also not have spaces. You go into that folder, and then you make a folder for each of like your subjects or just any subjects, or like name it whatever you want, and then go into a specific directory, and then go back out to the directory. And you should also see your like terminal react with the same answers and stuff like that. Cool. So yeah, if you wanna, I'll give us a few minutes, like 2 or 3 minutes to do this, and then we'll move on to the next section. Awesome. Okay, so I'm gonna presume that that was like generally pretty quick, so we can move on to the next component. But also, obviously, if you want to do these later as well, you should be able to just go to these slides and like do the same things. Also, just again flagging, this is like relatively introductory, and there's a lot of things. Also, I'll talk about like a resource that you can go to at the end of the slideshow. So hopefully, like this will be like more interesting and we can control the pacing better. Great. Yeah. If there are any questions, just feel free to continually direct them at us. Cool. So now the question is like, so okay, so we have these commands, we can use this like we can use the command line interface, like, so what? And one thing that, wow, like, the way you can tell that I didn't write these slides is that I'm like, this is extremely big brain, I guess, is that Git can be used in the CLI. So what does this look like? So firstly, it's just some annoying setup. Basically installation's always kind of annoying. I think these instructions are up to date the last time I checked, but if there are issues, obviously feel free to let us know in the chat. But yeah, once you do this, it should not take too long. You can yeah, you can download Homebrew or you can go to the GitHub download website and you can download these things. If you're a Linux user, we're gonna trust that you already know how to install Git. So that's why the instructions are not here. But yeah, generally you should just install and then configure your username, email, etc., etc. As you can see, these slides have inherited from generations and generations of past dev heads, which is why the names are all a little different. Cool. So we'll give like, a little bit to like install these instructions, but also obviously you guys can feel free to just like follow along the slides and, jump back to this. So actually in the interest of time, I'm going to move on. But yeah, like this installation shouldn't be too bad. But anyway, the Git principles is that you edit a lot of file, like some important Git principles is one of them is that sometimes you're editing a lot of files, but you don't necessarily want to share all the files because maybe some of them you're just prototyping or some of them you're maybe like you want to not leak the information because maybe you have like an API key or something like that. So Git provides steps to keep some changes on your computer while pushing some others onto github.com. So the steps are that you like, you can change and edit a file, you add it to the staging area so you can like split some large changes into multiple commits so that you can do good practice version control, which basically means that like, you're not like changing a billion features at once and then you don't know which one is it that broke prod or like that broke like the functionality of your entire app. And then you can commit those specific files to the staging area so you can add like a specific like checkpoint or breakpoint in history and then you can push like those changes that are staged onto github.com or like the repository in the cloud. Cool. So this is like a very, very important principle. And the question then is like sort of how do multiple people work on the same code? And like, if you like have a bunch of changes, what happens if like someone like pushes like these two changes that are like changing the specific color of like a certain, like nav, maybe it's changing the color of a nav bar on the app. And then someone else is like, no, like they are moving a bunch of images around. And then so actually they like had the nav bar like be like the previous color. So how do you work on the same code without necessarily breaking everything? And then also, how do you test multiple features on your code? And just generally like the same principles that we were talking about beforehand that like Git is very, very important, that are very important to Git. Branches solve these problems. So as you can see that maybe there's like a bunch of different trees, like a bunch of different like pathways that you can go with your like, Git history and versions and you can merge these basically. So that's like generally some like general principle of like how you use branches. And then so let's just go straight to practice because I think this is more important. So yeah, if you want to fork, so forking a repository basically means that like you creating a copy of a directory like publicly for yourself in a way that is like that like I think follows to the previous versions. So yeah, you can use the specific repo for this challenge. And so you can like clone the fork in your terminal and then you so you type these into your terminal. Also, I think you might need to check that you are like have authentication set up so that your like GitHub is like your local computer's terminal is like connected to your GitHub account so you can actually clone it. But I think this might be fine actually. It might be just local to your computer. Okay. So yeah, if you basically yeah, so I think you should be forking your own copy and then you should be cloning the fork. So this link I think should be like your specific fork, just to be clear. And then you can check out a new branch may named after your GitHub username using these commands. So, like maybe it's a git branch Janet or like git checkout Janet. And then you can make a new file named after yourself. Also, just flagging, all of this right now can be done in the terminal. So you can just type these things in. I know some people, will be like, oh, like, can I do like, oh, but like I need to set this up in my IDE, aka like a development environment, integrated development environment. But for now, this is just like, this can all happen just using our knowledge of like the terminal. Cool. So you can do all of this stuff. And then once you do that, you're able to like stage the new file, which means that you're putting it into the space where you're ready to like push these commands. You're like setting up like a modular package of code that you want to like put onto the website. So try and avoid this git add dot because that will add literally everything in your repo. Generally, because we're just like playing with like a toy repo where we like don't really have anything right now, you like can do this. I admit sometimes I will also do this, but you should generally like if you're staging like specific files or specific sets of files, you should do like git add like a certain file name. So like name.txt for example. So just to make sure that like you're like not dumping a bunch of changes because then it makes the debugging process a lot more painful. Cool. And then so once you've done all of this, you should be able to commit your new file with a specific comment. So the dash m is one of the many commands that you can use along with the commit, which basically means like, oh, like this is a message that will appear on like the GitHub like commit history when you're reading through it. So yeah, you can say like, oh, my new file. And then once you have that, you can like push your branch back into the remote repository. So pushing it yeah, you can basically push this onto your specific repo and then like the changes on your local computer will happen to like implement all the changes on the branches. Cool. And then generally you might want to make sure that you have like the authentication set up. So when you're pushing to your repository, you should probably make sure that you have this like personal token that like authenticates you when you are trying to push from your local computer to your GitHub account, just because for security reasons. So I think there are the instructions here. Generally, if you have questions, feel free to ask us. But I will also say that like, generally like Googling slash like AI tools are pretty helpful with this. Cool. So the next thing that we could possibly do is once you have all of these changes and you've pushed them to branches, how do you actually combine the branches and, make sure that like everyone's code is like, like all the functioning stuff is set up in one place. So probably, set up in the main branch or set up like, you're merging some small branches of different features. So to do that, you make a pull request. So a pull request basically, you can just like, it's done on the GitHub. You basically generally you if you have different like if you if your commits to your branch are like different from maybe the main branch or whatever, like there will be the option of this pop-up where you can like compare the code and do pull requests. And basically you just click on that button and then you can like follow the instructions there. Usually they just ask you like, oh, add the messages to the commits and then yeah, you can like make a pull request and then people can also review and approve the pull request. So to do that, then they review like if there are any merge conflicts. So if there's any code that is like different between the two commits and then you can like once you fix those you can like merge them and like choose what parts to keep, what parts to discard, etc etc and generally clean up the code. So yeah, generally you can see like there are different commits and you have file changes and then so you'll be able to review pages like this. Cool. So just to recap, here are some things that you can do, which is like, you can clone it, you can clone it onto your local computer, you can like change directory into the specific folder, you make a branch, you can check out to that branch, so you can like switch to the branch, and then touch is just like this command that like makes a new like text, like that makes a new file. And then so yeah, like when you do ls, you can see like, oh, there are like these multiple files that you can see and then you can check your Git status. This is important if you're like are not sure what branch you're on sometimes, and you can like be on like different branches. And then also when you're like checking like files or whatever, you can like see okay like what files are going to be staged, what files are staged, what files are going to be committed, etc. etc. So generally here are like some examples of commands that you could use. But yeah, and then you can like add the specific like files to the staging area and then you can check the status again and you'll notice that oh like this is a part of the staging area now that can be committed and then you can commit it and then you can like check the status again and there's nothing to commit. So and then you can like push it to the specific branch. Cool. So yeah, basically then like once you push it, it will like, you'll have to authenticate and then I think this is for HTTPS. If you set up like an access token, you can do this thing called like SSH. So then basically it like assumes that the machine is yours and then you can just like log in and like authenticate as like your GitHub account using your personal keys. So yeah, basically you can do all of this stuff and as it says here, like you can create a PR so on GitHub and then you visit the GitHub link itself and you do it all on there. But yeah, generally this is the sense of how you like do GitHub. And then I guess, that's a very quick, very brief overview for how GitHub works. I think if you're interested, I know some of you guys have been asking like pretty advanced questions. There's this thing called the missing semester. So this is very much like much higher level, much more intense, but it's like a very, very good course about what is the command line interface? How do we do the terminal? And actually, one of the fun facts is that one of the creators of this course is actually a past Hack MIT dev member who is incredible and did a lot of wonderful work for us. So yeah, if you're interested, we will send this link into the Discord as well. And actually, I can just send this to the chat, actually. Okay, I just sent it to the chat, but basically, this is just also like a great resource for like more advanced techniques, which I think maybe people would also really, really enjoy if you enjoyed this workshop. Cool. So just some final reminders for the workshop in general. Sorry, for Blueprint, the hackathon and learnathon in general. Your parents do need to fill out the consent form for you to check in, and you can check into BP at 8:30 a.m. tomorrow morning, and then you can review like the general schedule at guide.hackmit.org, but you'll have most of the up-to-date info happening in sorry it should be I think BP dash Discord and Go Discord both link to the same link the same Discord server invite, but you should be able to like just make sure that you've joined the Discord so that you can check anything that is happening. So yeah, if there are any questions, feel free to ask. Hopefully we were able to answer like sort of questions and give you a prime refresher. But otherwise, that is it for this workshop. And you can always feel free to ask us any questions, like either in the chat or in the Discord or by email. Cool. Happy hacking.
Thanks, Janet, and hope you guys all enjoyed. We'll keep the stream up for another minute or two so that we can answer any lingering questions in the chat. But please remember, if you do have any questions, you can always send them in the Discord, and yeah, we'll have many members of our team there available to answer questions. And then, of course, tomorrow during the hackathon. So we'll see you guys bright and early tomorrow morning in the status center. Please make sure you have your consent forms filled out and all finalized, and come with your QR code either added to Apple Wallet or with the email prepared. And yeah, looking forward to meeting you all tomorrow. And this is super exciting.